Well, let's move on to a different aspect of museums. So we've talked a little bit about thinking of ideas for things that museums can do. That's not the challenge. The challenge is the funding and the resources.
Yes.
So obviously there's going to be a challenge with keeping up with the times, as we say. But what are some good ways that museums can capitalize on some of the resources they have, whether that's social media or getting out there with a few videos? What are some things that they can do?
So we didn't have a strong social media presence, and I would say even now we still don't necessarily. But for us, it's been engagement toward any type of new graphic. We did new branding, so it's a little bit more appeasable. We restructured how we talk to people, that we're staying consistent with how we're putting that message out, whether it be Facebook, social media, even newsletters, emails, not spamming people, but making sure that they're aware of what's going on and giving at least enough representation out there. So if you miss it the first or second time, you at least catch it the third time. We don't have the opportunity for a lot of video content, mostly because that means that one of us has to put our face on the camera, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But as we all know, it's a hard thing to get used to. And I even personally struggle with trying to decide where I fall in as a representation face of the museum while still trying to make sure that the museum represents itself in generality as a history, as a building, as a monument, monumental structure. And so I don't get on social media myself talking to people as often as I probably should, but we're just working in that general direction.
Right. So, like, keeping on the idea with technology, has technology changed the way that the museums are operating? I suppose specifically in your case.
A lot of it is training. The generally senior citizens, the older generation, are the ones who are engaging with people, checking them in. And information is really important to us, especially as a small museum. So not only are we making sure that our check-in area is simple, right? Where you used to tap physical buttons on a credit card machine, right? The little handheld ones, little boxes, to making sure that they're trained and comfortable on an iPad with Square, and how to take a credit card that way is just very different. But also the stats are very important, and making sure that they understand what we do with those, which is on another screen. It's on something that they might have to troubleshoot. Because people have to come in. They don't necessarily have to give us their name, but I want to know how many people are with you, and I want to know where you came from. I need to be able to kind of track that stuff. And between that and training volunteers, and then all the other things that you might have to pay for as a subscription, but ultimately make your life easier.
Right.
And as a business person on the side, people are like, oh, you're so easy to, pay however much money a month. I was like, why? It's way cheaper than if I did it. If I had to do that by hand, if I had to create a process that way, I guarantee you it would be far more expensive to pay me to do that than if I pay monthly for that. And now it's because technically I'm part-time. Technically. I'm not, but I am. But now instead of having a part-time employee, now you have a full-time employee because you're using technology and these other assets as a small company to bridge the gap between what you're physically capable of and what you're actually capable of. And that technology for the museum, whether it be membership systems, things that we use to collect donations, event management, all those things are very important for us to use efficiently, because we will need to pay for it, but we need to make sure that it works well enough so it's still efficient. Like, you're not getting the bare minimum because you don't want to pay a lot. Guaranteed you're probably still going to be spending time manipulating that to make it work for what you want it for.
I suppose it kind of extends into like that delegation aspect of directing that you made mention of, where technology has enabled us to have so many more tools at our disposal. Just got to pay our fair share for them.
Well, and a lot of people can get bogged down to understanding what their options are. So obviously the research is very important, but it is probably the most underutilized benefit of our age, I believe. You obviously have to find the right tool for how you operate, but utilizing those in the right way immediately releases some of your workload in more ways than one. And then you get to train people on how to use it, hopefully, in which case now you're magnifying, replicating, and exponentially like supercharging how much work that you can get done because they're using the same tools you are.
Right. So, different aspect of museum directing then. Do you see other museums or historical societies as competition to your museum?
No. So we have, there's us, there is the Sumas Museum, which very different because they're in a historical home, I believe. I can't remember after the flood, but I'm pretty sure that they are. And then you have the Walker Museum, very different, way more arts. And then you have the Spark Museum.
Yes.
That's there. And I could be like, I could put on a wish list. I could walk into their museums and be like, oh my gosh, this would be great. But the application, even if I bring in what they have, is completely different. And because we're a small town museum, but we're a 30,000 square foot building that's all being used for museum, I can't compare. But I would say it's a good, healthy competition. Not because you want their visitors to come to you or you want to take away anything that you want, but there's a more of a level of what are they using to attract people and can I implement it here? Okay, well, I'm going to go see what they're doing in terms of like, can I get it?
Right.
Can I get what they get? Can I apply it to what I'm doing? And will it be a benefit to me? So competition wise, maybe that's kind of a little bit more accurate, but not competition wise as in, you're on a sports team and who's going to be more successful.
No, I think that is a better way to look at it, where it's not about taking more of the market share necessarily, because that's even a weird way to frame a lot of non-for-profit work in the first place.
Yeah. And I think it's just like everything else in this world. There is so much opportunity for everything to occur in the same space. And when you work equally, if you understand where your gap is, and you learn how to fill that gap, then you're also appealing to a whole different subset of people who are not getting like the other museum or museum activity is not appeasable to them. They're like, oh, well, I did it because I needed something to do, but you brought this into the fold. I'm so glad you did this. I've been looking for something like this before because it's been different or done differently or told differently or whatever the case may be.
Right. So when it comes to running these museums, then do you think it is, like, I think you've alluded to it already, having an active relationship with other museums to see what they're doing, what their challenges are. Do you think it's also a benefit to have those active relationships with city officials, with county representatives?
Oh, yes. I think that any outlook is important because they all play a role in dictating how you get perceived. From the museum world, it's different. It's, as a museum, what we want to represent. How do we want to represent our heritage? How do we want to tell those stories? From a city aspect, from city officials, hey, let's talk about what you're doing. Let's talk about what funding might be available. Oh, grants, they're very specific. So if I'm talking to them and asking them questions, if they're being honest about what the availability is, well, I can manipulate the other part to fit this business financial side that I'm getting information from my city official or representative by. And now the two can coexist where they couldn't before. I'm going to go down this path and I'm going to put this great exhibit together and I'm going to appease the crowd and my community. But I now do not qualify for any funding because I have not done my homework and understood what they're giving money to right now. So I have no access. And one allows me to do more of the other.
Right. It is a balancing act.
Yeah. And it can get kind of complicated, to be very honest. We've tried grant writing. We've done that stuff. It is a very delicate and temperamental world. And the people who are good at it know it. They get it. They get the talk. They walk the walk, like all that kind of stuff. We want to talk about skill sets to find those, gather the information, put together the proposal, get the funding. It's a lot of work.
I thought it was interesting when I first came across the title of grant writer. And seems like an odd kind of job. And then I started applying for different grants because I was going for certain city jobs. I'm here's my proposal. Here's what I could do for you for this kind of grant. And oh boy, each of those take hours.
It's like basically writing a college essay with references and empirical data and all of this. It's like a thesis statement, to be honest. And when somebody comes to me and they say, "Oh, you guys should go for a grant," and I go, "You want to come help me? By all means, I'm happy to come." We still look, but it is not a simple thing.
No,
at all.
No, and then sometimes you'll look at the grants and it's a huge process, and then like the bursary is $750.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a lot of that is appeasable for people who have dynamic programming. So you're hoping that you're looking for grants that you already fall into, right? And the grant world and the lists and the things that you read through is just huge. And a lot of them sound more complicated than they are. But unless you're in that world, you can't figure out which ones those are.
Yeah.
So, and some of them, and then the funding request, right? So if you get money, you have to spend the money within a certain amount of time. And if you have any, you have to give it back. And if there's all these restrictions because they're getting their own funding because they're foundations. And from the business side, that's more helpful. Honestly, when you're talking to somebody about grants and you understand how the business world works on the other side of their grant, to try to explain to people, we're a small town museum. There are things that are just not appeasable to grants, whether in multiple ways. It helps a little bit more to reconcile it in their brain of why you're not doing it.
Right.